right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about a movie that really does not need much introduction. We are talking about the new ninth movie from Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. With me today is Joe Black, returning to the show. And just so you know, after this episode, later this week, we're also going to have a special episode where we rank our favorite Tarantino movies in order. So look forward to that as well. You can, of course, subscribe to Piecing It Together on your podcast app of choice. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join the Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all these movies. And you know what? With that said, we got a long one for you. So let's jump into our conversation about Quentin Tarantino's ninth film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. All right, so back on the show today, we've got with us Joe Black. Joe, how's it going, man?
Oh, it's going. Good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Always glad to have you on the show. It's been a little while, but we were going to have our mutual friend Chad Clinton Freeman on this one, but he unfortunately had to sit this one out. But I'm certainly, I think of all the people that could fill in for him, I think you're definitely a great choice. I think you're going to do wonderful. You're going to do wonderful here on the show today.
Thank you. I've seen the movie enough times.
Yeah,
I hope that I could.
it sure sounds like it. So yeah, Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I mean, who knew when we started this podcast that we'd even have another Tarantino movie? I mean, it's an event when these things happen. But I'm happy whenever they happen. It's just his movies are just so rich and so full of so much to really, get into. The number one thing I want to say at the top of the episode before we start getting into some puzzle pieces is that with somebody like Tarantino, there are so many influences that he right up front will tell the world, like, these are my influences for this movie. And so it's an interesting filmmaker to try to approach with our show's little setup that we do here.
Right. No, I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think where I'm going to be coming from with a lot of my puzzle pieces is, I think possibly inspired him, even though I don't think he mentioned any of these. But I mean, there's certainly, I think, movies that, recall similar themes and things that he's doing here with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah, that was kind of the approach I was going to take, more less of like what his influences were, but things that are like thematically similar and how they all kind of, that's kind of the approach, except for the first piece that I'm going to do.
Mhm.
So that one's a direct, like, obvious influence. I was going to say though about, like, I live in Los Angeles, and this is my third Tarantino film since living in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's always a big deal, but nothing like this one
Yeah.
has happened before. Like this one, um, every theater showing has sold out throughout the weekend. Um, they added show times at every AMC, the one in Century City. Every screen was dedicated to it, and they're all sold out all weekend. Whole blocks have shut down. Everybody's talking about this movie. It's really nice to see everybody getting excited again about movies that have nothing to do with, boomerang shields and Iron Men.
Yeah, for sure. That actually makes me wish I was in LA right now, but
No, you're
yeah.
fine. You're fine, trust me. We have earthquakes here,
Oh
you
yeah.
know?
Hey, we have earthquakes here. That's the new thing, and we've got
Copycats.
grasshoppers all over the place. But that's another story for another time. We're being invaded. But yeah, no. I mean, it's obviously an ode to the city, so I'm sure that it's like just such a major deal out there.
Oh, when he was shooting it too, it was insane. Everything was shut down for weeks and weeks at a time. Like Hollywood Boulevard, he was shutting it down block by block for like 2 months straight. And when you watch the movie, they literally just drive through it.
That's
Like,
Oh, it must have been crazy, the filming. I'm sure there must have been so many like sightings of this stuff happening.
oh, I live right there, so I got so bored of watching production. Like after like the fourth week, I'm like, ah, I gotta get to work.
Well, I think it's time for us to get to work. Why don't we get into some puzzle pieces? What do you got for your first puzzle piece?
Okay, so the first time I saw the movie, I immediately saw Brad Pitt's first outfit, and I was like, "Oh wow, he's definitely dressed like Billy Jack." like with the the straight denim jacket with the zipper and with the moccasins.
Hmm.
And and I actually like went home and looked it up, and apparently, yes, they did kind of base the character of Cliff Booth like off of Tom Laughlin, who played Billy Jack.
Huh.
Um, I don't know if you're familiar with Billy Jack. It's a film series, started in the late '60s, went through the mid '70s. Um, have you heard of it?
I have not. No. I
Okay,
think the name sounds familiar, but I don't really know the movies.
it is the most bonkers, bizarre film series. It makes no sense. It's wonderful though. It's about a half white, half Native American named Billy Jack, who was a Green Beret, a keto expert. Like he's like a one man army.
Uh-huh.
And basically, the majority of the franchise is him protecting a school of hippie progressive orphan children from bad guys, whether they be bikers or evil politicians or the police. Um, they're very much about like it was Tom Laughlin, writer director Tom Laughlin's response to like Nixon era and segregation. It was all hippie progressive ideas and about pacifism and create and being creative, but it was very violent. These movies are very violent. They're pacifist movies that are very violent, and they're full of like rape and I mean they're just insane. My parents let me see them when I was very young, growing up in the '90s. I dressed up as Billy Jack for Halloween when I was a kid. So I see where the Cliff Booth character, Tom Laughlin, was a very strange man. He wrote these movies and he directed most of them. Um, he was very strange, and he really believed in what he was doing. As contradictory as the themes and messages and morals of these movies are, you can tell that he cared, and you can tell that he believed in Billy Jack, so much so that he almost believed Billy Jack was a real person.
Hmm.
He one time famously said, "The children of this nation only have two heroes to look up to: Ralph Nader and Billy Jack." Um, yeah, he very fascinating. Yeah, I could go on and on about Billy Jack. Billy Jack, the third Billy Jack film was actually the first film to be released wide across the country on the same day. It's the
Huh.
first blockbuster release that he did himself on over 1,000 screens. He bought out advertisement time on the news in every major outlet. Um, it made $11 million opening weekend, then tanked after that because it was a terrible, ridiculous 3 hour long film. That's just way out there. But then people at Universal said maybe we could do that with our Shark movie, and then the summer blockbuster was formed. So even in the spirit of that, I could see where this movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, was influenced by Billy Jack,
Sure.
by this like hippie progressive idea, very violent, um, with good intentions, completely changing the way that Hollywood is done.
Yeah.
Um, which is very much in tune with the themes of this movie. I mean, even Billy Jack himself being half Native American, but acting like a cowboy.
Sure.
Um, One of the genius aspects of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is that juxtaposition of the Old West and hippies. Um, like these almost like two sides of the moral coin. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And the Manson family living on a Western ranch. Like, what a like, how did no other movie ever do this before?
Sure. Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
really play up this brilliant metaphor that's so obvious when you think about it. I mean, for God's sake, the main man's kid's name is Tex.
Yeah.
Like, his name is Tex. It's really interesting. It's the handoff that's on display in this movie is wonderful.
Well, yeah, like I said, I haven't seen the Billy Jack films, but I mean, all of what you're saying there just sounds so interesting. Such a kind of weird place to get the character from, but sure sounds like there's probably a lot to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this noble sincerity that Billy Jack has, and that Cliff Booth has. You know what I mean? Like, when I mean, do we do spoilers on this? I can't
Sure,
remember.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. When Leo tells him, "Hey, I can't pay for you anymore," he's not resentful.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "That's a good idea. Do what you got to do."
Yeah.
When he's like injured and he's like, "I'll go to the hospital." He's like, "Your wife is in there. Like, don't be ridiculous." It's much like Billy Jack. There's a scene in Billy Jack where the evil mayor's son, who's just running amok because he can, like, Billy Jack's finally had enough of him. The mayor's son kills this kid in cold blood. Billy Jack goes to kill him and he kicks in the kid's door, and he's like in bed with a 13-year-old girl. And Billy Jack just looks at him and he looks at the girl and says, "How old are you?" She goes, 13. And he just almost cries and he goes, "Get out." and he walks towards the bad guy. The kid pulls a gun on him, shoots him in the gut, and Billy Jack doesn't even react. He just karate chops the kid in the throat
Damn, we
and
we
kills him
we
at the end.
need a Billy Jack for this era. That's what we
Right. Well,
need.
I mean, Cliff Booth is pretty fucking close,
Yeah, we
man.
need
Like,
more Cliff Booth adventures for sure.
yeah, like when he goes to beat the shit out of that hippie for, stabbing the tire,
Yeah.
it's not even like personal. It's like, no, like you don't get to do this.
Yeah,
You know
exactly.
what I mean? And same thing with Billy Jack. Billy Jack's like, no, you don't get to murder and rape people. Are you crazy? It-
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I'm gonna go with my first puzzle piece, which was kind of the first thing I thought of once I was watching it, and that is the Coen Brothers' Hail Caesar, which is
Mm.
another movie that deals with, recreating that classic Hollywood and the whole Hollywood structure, the system, and getting into recreations of those, old classic films, which is something that Tarantino is getting a chance to do here in many ways. And then also, in a lot of ways, Alden Ehrenreich's character, I believe is his name, he's kind of, almost like a Leonardo DiCaprio's character. It's kind of the same kind of thing going on there with their characters, with the kinds of films that they're in and everything like that.
Mhm.
But that was definitely the first thing I thought of, as this is kind of almost in a way, even though we get into totally different directions that the film eventually ends up going. But in a way, it starts off as like Tarantino's version of what the Coens are doing.
That's interesting. Yeah, how I didn't make that comparison in my mind is beyond me because funny, the Coen Brothers movie that came to mind for me was Inside Llewyn Davis. I
Mm.
almost was going to make that one of my puzzle pieces, but Hail Caesar is much better. um, did you find, not to imply a criticism here about either film because I really love both of them,
Mhm.
but that as like accurate as the films that they're shooting or the TV shows that he's putting on display in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, as accurate as they are in ways, they're also a little they're also a little uh out of place. Like I feel like both the Coen brothers and Quentin couldn't help but be better than the old time TV shows of the old time movies.
Right,
Like
right.
Bounty Law and in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the show Bounty Law and the other show, Lancer that they're doing,
Mhm.
the acting is too good.
Right,
The
right.
writing is too good. The lighting is too natural.
Yeah.
Um, Same thing with the Coen brothers and Hail Caesar. While very much so in the spirit of those classic Hollywood 50s films, like all the like the homoerotic overtones of it and like the like kind of on the nose sexuality. It's like
Yeah.
it's interesting that they chose to not be true.
It's almost like
Uh
that one band, I can't remember their name, but they're, like, kinda popular right now, and they sound, like, a lot like Led Zeppelin, but they're not Led
mm,
Zeppelin even a little bit, you know?
right,
But
right,
but
right,
it's like they're doing that thing, but, they're too clean, they're too
right.
produced, and it's not exactly the same thing. It's, like,
Maybe
impossible.
that's maybe that's them playing up to the romanticism of it all too, I guess. You know
Sure.
what I mean? Like maybe showing us how they see these things. I know that Quentin talks about how much he loves William Shatner in Star Trek,
Mhm.
and me being a lifelong Star Trek fan, you kind of learn to more like you're not really like when you watch Star Trek, if you're a true fan, not to speak for all fans, but like the quality isn't on your mind.
Yeah.
You're really able to get wrapped up in what's happening. You know what I mean? The tone and the spirit of the show. So maybe that's what they're doing in Hail Caesar, and that's what he's doing in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Sure, sure.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's very possibly a part of it as well. Absolutely.
They both have spectacle too.
Sure.
Like the Hail Caesar stuff is not just jokes. They're not making fun of that era.
Right.
Like the dance numbers are wonderful.
Oh yeah, they are. Absolutely. Yeah. What's
Mm.
his name? Channing Tatum kills it.
No dames, so good.
Absolutely. Well, what do you got for your next puzzle piece?
Okay, like you know me, I try to go in chronological order.
Sure.
But the next piece that I had in mind was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Nice.
Um, this one might sound like a bit of a stretch, but it was the only other movie I could think of that kind of had this thing where this movie is a buddy movie,
Hmm.
but much like Bill and Ted is a buddy movie, and there have been many buddy movies throughout the years, but these two movies are the only ones that immediately come to mind where the two buddies never fight. They
Hmm.
never split apart. They never have that, like, "We're not friends anymore. We're not talking to each other." You think about every other major duo, like, think about, like, Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World, or you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Harold and Kumar, or, they always have, like, the big breaking off, and then they come back together as
Sure.
friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Bill and Ted and this movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, they never have that, no matter what they're facing. And that solid foundation where you're never afraid of the two of them parting ways, that foundation makes you feel safe and thought of in a way.
Ah,
Um, and so I feel like with the risks he's taking with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, not only with how he's changing history, but also with just the structure of the movie or lack thereof, depending on how you want to talk about it,
mm.
that solid foundation that you don't have to worry about that friendship. There's something very comforting about that, and it makes it much more you're much more willing to go along on the ride, whatever that ride is.
I gotta say that this may be my favorite puzzle piece of this entire like podcast so far. I think that is the greatest
Oh,
puzzle piece. I mean, that is so interesting. It's such a
oh, cool.
sweet and positive outlook on it on a connection between these two movies that like I would have never thought of, but I love it. I think it's so great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, yeah, I'm glad to share it.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And that actually that reminds me of one of my favorite parts of the movie actually is in the end when they're watching his show and they're just like laughing. And I'm sure as
Mhm.
as a creator of films yourself that you have had that moment, watching a movie that you worked on and just, sitting on the couch with your friends and just loving the little parts that happen and everything. I love
Oh,
that.
yeah, I mean, there's one movie I made about 5 years ago or 6 years ago with my buddy, Jimmy, who he's not an actor or anything, but, like, we were so short on actors, I threw him in front of the camera. He was my camera guy,
Mhm.
and he had to play like a CIA operative,
Mhm.
and Jimmy, I mean, he's a big, sweet hamster-looking
Yeah.
fellow, but he, like so in the scene, he has to, like, pound on this door, and then he has to shoot the handle, right?
Yeah.
But Jimmy, in his, like, zeal, like, with his mouth, made a sound effect when he shot the door,
That
and
rules.
I, of course, I left the shot, and I mean, I, of course, did the sound over, but I loved showing it to my friends and watching that beat where I'm like, "Here he goes,"
Yeah.
and you see Jim every time. Oh, yeah,
That's awesome.
for sure.
Well, I will go with my next puzzle piece, and I think I actually brought this up last time we were covering a movie. It is Tropic Thunder, the Ben Stiller film,
Mm,
skewering the entertainment industry and movies and movie making, and especially the main reason I thought of it with this movie is actors' insecurities and. With
mm,
Leonardo DiCaprio's character and his insecurity about his the place of his career and where his career is going and all that, and that's like a big driving force behind his character. And I think that insecurity is something that is so it's such a silly way captured by Tropic Thunder, and I just think of that movie so highly. I love it so much, and and I think that it does such a great job of lovingly skewering the world of actors.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm not a fan of that one, but
Yeah,
you're not wrong in your assessment at all,
sure.
in my opinion. Um, that is something that's interesting about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, though, that, like, the trailer almost tries to sell certain beats as, like, satirical.
Mm,
Like, when you see in the trailer when he's, like, the 14 Fists of McCluskey, where he's, like, frying the Nazis with the flamethrower, it's,
yeah,
like, silly.
right.
But in the movie, if you watch how Quentin structures that insert, there's so much buildup in the footage to Leo doing that,
Yeah,
that suddenly it's a real scene,
yeah,
and it's not out of context, so it's not like a joke. It may be a little funny, but it's not a joke.
sure.
This movie is very uncinematic in that way. It's not a satire, it's not
Hmm.
a parable, it's not a um, and so it is a nice contrast to Tropic Thunder, which is a total satire of the
Sure.
insecurities that Tropic Thunder is almost self-depreciating.
Yeah. No,
Um,
absolutely, it is 100%.
and it and in this one, what's so fascinating is that this one is almost like a movie for actors in a way because, like, kind of by the structure of when Leo's doing Lancer, like he fucks up the scene and he's so embarrassed. He has that breakdown. Then he goes back on set and he nails it, right?
Mhm.
But like it's not as like cinematic as any other movie would make it. Like his mess up doesn't seem that bad.
Sure.
And his like triumph, he doesn't give, a Daniel Day-Lewis performance.
Right, right.
But that's what it's really like to be on set.
Sure.
That's what it's really like to like nail something. And this movie's just so full of love. Like the movie is just full of love.
Mhm.
Unlike Tropic Thunder, which
Right.
is
Well, and I think everything you're saying right there, it speaks to something that is kind of a criticism, but not of the movie, but
right.
if anyone who's like a member of our Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group would have seen that we were all kind of complaining about the trailer to this movie. I think it was a really kind of piss poor trailer that didn't do a good job of selling the movie on what it really is. And
Interesting.
and going into it, I absolutely thought this was going to be more of a satire of Hollywood. And so
Sure.
I think that's why I think, and I've only seen it once so far, I have a feeling I'm going to really like this movie a lot more on my second viewing, kind of knowing what I'm getting into ahead of time. I think it's going to make for a better experience the second time.
I the first time I saw it a week before it opened at the ArcLight in 70 millimeter,
Mm,
and very funny thing, I was sitting in a chair all by myself. Like the chair I was in is like sectioned off like a little island,
hmm.
and about halfway through the movie, somebody grabbed my shoulder and got in my face, and it was Courtney Love, and she goes, "Where the fuck am I supposed to sit?" And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh, sorry." Anyways, so I saw the movie that night, and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly liked many things in it.
Uh huh.
Um, but I said to my friends afterward, I was like, I know that I'm gonna love that eventually.
Right.
Um, and then the second time I saw it, I actually got invited to the red carpet premiere 2 days later. So I was at the red carpet premiere for the movie.
That's awesome.
Um, funny enough, Brad Pitt, who played Joe Black in Meet Joe Black, he and I were wearing almost identical suits. Um, but the second time I saw it, I liked it even less. I was so bored by it.
Hmm,
But the third time I saw it, yesterday, um, I just fell head over heels in love with it.
that's awesome.
Um, I think it's because the first time I had to accept there was no story, and then the second time I had to accept that it's not about what's happening because not a lot happens in the movie.
Sure.
And the third time I think I finally got it that it's about what's going on,
Mm,
not what's happening.
right. Right.
So,
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, what do you got for your next puzzle piece?
okay, to totally do a 180 from the sweet, cute Bill and Ted puzzle piece, American Psycho.
Okay.
Um, While a much bleaker film, I just, it's another film about, like, a transitioning of times, and feeling obsolete and the insecurity of feeling obsolete and the extreme measures you go to
Mm,
when you're feeling obsolete, both, physically, psychologically, like, the things you're willing to do, the compromises you're willing to make to stay relevant.
sure.
Um,
That's interesting.
thankfully thankfully, Rick, I don't, consider at all to be an anti-hero.
Mhm.
I consider him to be just as, quote, unquote, "doomed" as Patrick Bateman, if you will. Um, but, I think that they're both like, because again, American Psycho, there isn't as much a story as there is just kind of like a pressure,
Mm,
much like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where, like, there's not a story, we just all know what it's leading to.
sure,
You
sure.
you know what I mean? So we're not watching him go on a journey.
Right,
We're watch
exactly.
much like Patrick Bateman, and I think they're equally fascinating, and I'm very happy to see a movie that is so loving and kind,
Yeah,
being treated just as fascinating as, naked Batman running down a hallway with a chainsaw.
sure, sure.
Um, I'll just
Absolutely.
say, I'll take Leo with a flamethrower over Christian Bale with a chainsaw any day.
Yeah, yeah. I'll definitely take Leo with a flamethrower in any movie. I'd love to see him use a flamethrower again sometime.
Do you like Leo? Do
I
you like Leo?
I do. I do. Funny enough though, I he's not like somebody I really love the way a lot of people seem to love him.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. I mean,
I
generally I like what he does, and I think he's had some very great standout performances over the years. But he's definitely like if I was making a list, he wouldn't really be on my list of my favorites.
Honestly, outside of the work he's done with Scorsese, I find him to be a total wash.
Mm.
as an actor, and even in a couple Scorsese, like I really think Wolf of Wall Street's pretty awful.
Mm.
And
I'm
I
not a
think his
big fan of that
performance,
either. Yeah.
yeah, I think his performance is very on the nose. But The Aviator, up until this film, The Aviator was the only time I've ever seen a Leo performance where I'm like, that's the performance. You
Sure,
know what I mean?
sure.
There it is. Um, and this one, but this performance, I mean, even in Django, I didn't think he was anything. I mean, he's not bad. It's just like replace him with anyone.
Right,
Put
right.
Channing Tatum in that part. You know what
Sure.
I mean? Um, but in this film, I thought he was just absolutely wonderful.
Mhm.
Like just really captivating. His scenes would be so boring if he wasn't.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, I've heard a few people be like, "You could cut Sharon scenes out of this movie." I'm like, "I don't think so. I think you could cut Rick." Like, that's the if it weren't for how sincere and wonderful Leo is in the movie. So,
Sure, sure.
you win this round, Leo.
Well, I think my next puzzle piece kind of goes along really well with what you were saying about American Psycho, and that is the Charlie Kaufman film Synecdoche, New York. Um,
Oh.
because and this is maybe a little out of left field, but I feel like Caden's little speech in there about how there's what do you say? There's 3 million people on this earth or whatever, and they
Mm,
all play their own part in the story. They all exist for a reason,
mm,
and I feel like that is a big theme for what makes Once Upon a Time in Hollywood so great is that Rick Booth and I mean Cliff Booth and Rick Dalton are finding their place in the story, and that they still have a reason. They still have a reason to exist in this world that, at first they feel is leaving them behind a little bit.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, and I like that as the movie goes on, they become, like, almost more involved with the world around them. Like, at the beginning of the movie, they're so isolated, you
Sure.
know? Um, like, I mean, Brad Pitt's feeding his dog for 5 minutes, which I almost said The Long Goodbye is one of my puzzle pieces, um, but I thought that'd be a little too obvious and on the nose, and also, like, because I mean, that film, it opens with 10 minutes of Elliot Gould feeding his cat.
Right.
And this movie, I'm like watching that dog scene. I'm like, I get what your curry brand cat food. I get it. But they're just living their lives, and slowly more they have to kind of come out of their shell. And like Leo has to decide when he comes out of his shell if he likes to be a part of this new world.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like that's his conflict at the end. I mean, he just went and started 4 movies.
Yeah.
But here he is, kind of with moppish, hippie-ish hair. Um, and he hates hippies even more now.
Sure. Yeah.
It's Synecdoche, New York. My God, I think you're the only person still talking about that movie.
I love that movie.
Yeah, I saw half of it once. And
It's not an easy watch, that's for sure.
sure, yeah. If that ever plays here, because LA, they any excuse to play anything ever, they
Sure.
do it.
Yeah.
I would definitely go give that a try in the theater. I don't really like Charlie Kaufman,
Oh,
but
I love him. He's my favorite, but
interesting.
yeah, I love the man. Love the man. He's written, but top 10 of my favorite films are most of them are Charlie Kaufman related. So,
Anomalisa.
oh yeah, love them all. Yep.
You want to talk about a movie about insecurity? Jesus.
Oh yeah,
Fine.
that is for sure. Well, what do you got for your next one?
The Aviator.
Oh, there you go.
Um, yeah, just like a sprawling epic kind of like that takes a lot of its time indulging in a Hollywood that's forgotten.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like Hollywood likes to pretend that it doesn't have a past while celebrating it. Hollywood has this tendency where they like to celebrate the things they want you to remember.
mm.
Um, I remember there was this article a couple of years ago where somebody was like, who's like lived here for 40 years and like, man, I miss when Hollywood had guts. Like when we dared to say, like, dude, we love cocaine and tanning and thong bikinis. And now we're like, no, we love Whole Foods. And we want to raise the minimum wage. And we, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
Hollywood used to be pretty audacious, for better or worse. And I don't know, it's Hollywood's almost like that child that doesn't like to look at the photos of itself when it was young and had the bowl haircut,
Right, right.
you know? And I think that both The Aviator and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood have a beautiful way of romanticizing the Hollywood of the past without condoning it.
Sure.
You got Brad Pitt with like at the beginning when Leo's crying and he's like, don't cry in front of the Mexicans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and you hear the audience go, "Oh shit!" But like I mean, when I think back on it, I've seen the movie 3 times. I can't think of any person of color in this film
Right. Yeah.
except for the stagehands on Lancer who are Hispanic.
Uh huh.
Um,
Yeah.
but like
Old
the movie
Hollywood.
doesn't wag a finger at that or imply that times it doesn't even imply that times were better back then.
Right.
Much like The Aviator, it's just like these are just like, wasn't this kind of like cool? Isn't it like romantic? That's
Hmm.
kind of the attitude, isn't it romantic?
Sure.
Like, you know, because I think that that's the one thing that's missing from Hollywood right now. Not the cocaine and tanning, which we've got plenty of that,
Sure.
but just this romantic idea, the romance, the notion that like we can celebrate the best things about something, and by celebrating the best things about something, others will strive to attain it,
Hmm.
hopefully through good means.
Sure. Well, I think that that's also part of the reason why it's so great when a Quentin Tarantino movie comes out, because it gets people thinking about that and talking about movies, really. I mean, people don't talk in a interesting way about movies when the next Marvel movie comes out, or the next Fast and the Furious movie comes out, or whatever. All respects to the Fast and Furious and Marvel movies, but they just don't inspire that kind of conversation. But Tarantino
Right.
sure does.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, like I'm kind of known as a loony bin Jim around here where like I'll see Transformers 4 and I'll speak thematically about what it's saying
Sure.
for till the cows come home. But or Fast and the Furious. I love those
I
damn movies. But what's really exciting about this movie, Hollywood loves to talk about itself.
Mhm,
That's just the truth. They love themselves. Like the last two Tarantino movies, while big events, of course, out here, it's nothing like this one.
mhm.
And partly because they were westerns, right?
Sure.
But this is Hollywood and we love ourselves out here and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like so I think that if anything, the rest of the nation be damned. This movie is kind of like, hey, Hollywood, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Get talking again, you know, s- um, for the sake of everyone else, for God's sake.
for
Like,
sure.
you know, thanks, Quentin.
Love it. Well, I will go with my next puzzle piece. It's a movie I didn't like that much, but I thought that there was a definite connection in the inserting the star into these old classic scenes and recreating classic moments and things like that, but in a different way, but that still brings a feeling of nostalgia, and that is Forrest Gump.
Ah, I
Um,
thought you were gonna say Kung Pao.
well, Kung Pao. You know what? Can I just replace the puzzle piece with Kung Pao? Because I'd much rather talk about Kung Pao. But uh, why don't we say a little Forrest Gump, a little Kung Pao? Let's tie it or something like that.
Perfect.
Yeah. But yeah, no. Adding the star into these classic moments, and it creates a feeling of nostalgia. It also it it ties this new movie to the past in a way that it does it in a really incredible way. And I guess even Forrest Gump, it was cool at the time, even if the movie is super sappy and just ridiculous.
Yeah, I would use the word awful.
Yes.
Um, and I was about to say no offense to Forrest Gump, but honestly, fuck
Yeah.
Forrest Gump.
Terrible movie.
Well, it is terrible, but okay, so this is really interesting again that I didn't even think of this one. Ah, you're good at this. You must be the host. Um, First of all, funny you bring up Forrest Gump because I'm sure you know notoriously it defeated Pulp Fiction. I use the word defeated
Yes,
at the
absolutely.
Oscars,
Yeah.
which is considered to be one of the great, uh, injustices of the Academy's
Oh
history.
yeah, we have a new podcast here on this network called Awesome Movie Year that I'm producing, and we're starting off with the year 1994, and that has absolutely come up in the conversations about how crazy that is that happened.
Well, when you do 98 and you guys try to say that Saving Private Ryan is better than Shakespeare in Love, have me on because I'll stand in Shakespeare in Love's corner and I'll come out swinging.
Nice,
Um,
nice.
but But Forrest Gump, the reason Forrest Gump is a terrible film,
Mhm.
um, is because Forrest is an inactive protagonist,
Mhm.
right? And and inactive in that he's not really affecting change, save for the one scene in Vietnam,
Mhm.
where he inadvertently, like, does it, you know what I mean?
Sure, sure.
But nothing that's happening around him affects him,
Yeah.
and, like, that's boring,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? So, like, just like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where there's not really a plot, it's about how the world is affecting someone.
Right,
So
it's
there's
affecting these characters.
right, exactly,
Yeah.
and Forrest Gump is just like, Elvis, which I think I don't think I'm mistaken. Kurt Russell did the voice of Elvis
Oh, really?
in Forrest Gump, but the actor who played Elvis was the guy from, The Frighteners, um,
Hmm.
who dies first in The Frighteners, the main girl's stupid boyfriend.
Right,
Anyways,
right.
um, but yeah, Forrest Gump is to me is nothing but nostalgia.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And like so, but when you see Leo inserted into The Great Escape, um, it's about it's about Leo, not about us, not about our memory of the moon landing, not about our memory of Vietnam, you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's a it's about Leo's character. We're there to see that, you know, and Forrest Gump just right place, right time, right marketing. It's also the only PG-13 film with full frontal nudity, graphic war violence, rampant drug use, and multiple uses of the F word.
Yeah,
You know,
they were allowed to get
I
away
wonder
with a lot.
what's at play there. Oh, but he runs real fast and the braces break off and they all have AIDS at the end, but we don't address it.
Well, before we move on to the next puzzle piece, do you want to say any words about Kung Pao? While
Oh, it's
while,
the
while you have
best.
the chance, you know.
Oh, I genuinely Kung Pao is arguably and for me the funniest movie that's ever been made.
It's
And
so good. It's so
yeah,
fucking good.
I mean you can't convince anybody one way or the other to like it or not. You can only hope that they see it and discover it for themselves.
Yeah,
But I
exactly.
will say one time my coworker at Blockbuster asked me if he could borrow the movie because I used to talk about it so much and I loaned it to him. And he came back to me, he's like, dude, I couldn't even finish this movie. And I have this friend Joe Neal, who he and I, that's our movie. Like we laugh so much at that movie when we try to watch it with other people, they just leave.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was on the phone with Joe Neal later that night. I was like, dude, I gave Clayton Kung Pao, and he said he couldn't even finish it. And Joe goes, why? Did the power go out?
Hilarious.
um, I'm still waiting for the sequel.
I know. I
Um,
was just talking about it like 2 days ago with someone. When is the sequel going to finally happen?
there's a series of kung fu movies called martial arts films rather called The Crippled Masters,
Mhm.
where it's a guy with no arms and a guy with no legs who like team up to fight together.
Mhm.
And I always thought it would be brilliant if the sequel, The Chosen One, finds his twin brother and they're the crippled masters, like Chosen One gets his arms cut off or
It,
whatever,
you run
you
into
know?
so many people out there in Hollywood. You need to find Odenkirk, find out when it's happening. It's got to
I've got a
happen.
few loose connections. I think I can make it happen. You're right.
Yes.
You've re-inspired me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Without
Yes.
you, Kung Pao 2 would not exist.
Oh, I would be so happy.
You're
So,
welcome, David.
so what do you got for your next puzzle piece?
Okay, so the next one I got is I almost didn't want to do this one either, but Inherent Vice.
Okay.
Um uh this one, part of it's personal. There was no movie that I was anticipating more than Inherent Vice.
Mm.
I just like everything about it was just I was so ready. It was everything I love about movies seemed to be coming together into one perfect film that was going to change things.
Hmm.
And when I saw it, I was like, hmm, well, maybe I'll love it eventually. And so somebody gave me a screener of it to watch too, because I have a lot of friends and who are in the guild, and we watched it all, and we watched a couple times, and I'd seen it like 5 times, and I was like, I swear, one day I'm gonna love this movie. Like I can feel it in my bones.
Yeah.
And then it came out on Blu-ray, and I was like, I'm gonna buy it. I don't like this movie, but
Right.
I'm gonna one day. And I bought it. And I watched it a couple times. I'm like, I'm gonna love it. I'm gonna love it. And then they played it at the New Beverly, Quentin Tarantino's theater,
Hmm.
as a midnight movie on film, and about an hour and 40 minutes into the movie, it switches reels, and I went, "Wait a minute, this comes later. this doesn't happen here. They skipped a reel.
Mhm.
Like, oh shit, and I went out into the lobby and I said to the guys like, dude, you skipped a reel. You messed up. And he's like, I'll check, and I went back into the theater and the reel kept playing. And then when it was done with that reel, suddenly it was the reel that was missing.
Huh.
I was like, "Oh shit, they swapped that." So the movie ends and everybody's leaving, and I'm asking people, like, "Did you notice that like they flopped those two?" Everyone's like, "No." Like, no, like none of everyone's like, "No." And I was like, "Have you seen the movie?" And they're like, "Yeah, of course. I love it." I was like, "They flipped it." And they're like, "No." And then I asked the guy as everyone left, I was like, "Dude, did you?" And he goes, "Yeah, dude, fucking reels 5 and 6. We fucked up."
Huh.
And I was the only person who noticed and or at least mentioned it. And that's when I realized I loved it. That like you don't have to be on board 100% with everything that something is, and something doesn't have to live up to your expectations.
Sure.
You know what I mean? When we're just looking to have our expectations met or to have, to see something sensational, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. Um, because much like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I mean, I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like if you took Quentin's name off of this, it'd be hard to guess who made it.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
other than all the shots of the feet.
Yeah,
Um,
right. But yeah,
even
it is
even
very different from his other films in a lot of ways.
Yeah, even the ending, which, is the most Tarantino part of the whole thing, the violence in it is uglier than his violence.
Mhm.
Like, the violence is real,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Up until the flamethrower.
Yeah.
Like, the violence is like, you don't wanna look at it. Kill Bill, you wanna see the head lopped off,
Yeah.
Glorious Bastards, you wanna see Hitler exploding,
Yeah.
but this, like, that girl getting her face smashed in, that's not pleasant, dude.
Right.
Um, and, yeah, like, I think that both films are like, auteurs that we come to expect something from who really just say, "Guys, I think movies are in a place right now. Hollywood is in a place right now that's just not healthy." And they both, Paul Thomas Anderson and Quentin, have made these films about an era forgotten where, like, it's not like they're saying things are better. It's like they're saying, "This is where the split happened.
Mhm.
Maybe we went down the wrong path, or maybe we've gone so far down the one path that we forgot about all the other paths that we could have taken."
Mhm.
Um, and I don't think they're trying to. I think that both these films are films for Hollywood. Um, like a kind of a, I don't want to say a wake up call because that's a condescension,
Mhm.
but just kind of a checking in or a reminder of like, guys, like there's a lot more to explore in mind than just money.
Sure.
Like there's a lot more to explore than just sensationalism and big payoffs. Like this is an art form, and not to say we should be like saying something deep with everything that we do, but there is artistry to it,
Yeah, yeah.
and there is excitement in creating. Like I can't imagine being like working on a Marvel movie for the most part. Not that I feel bad because I feel like I'm shitting on them. I kind of am, but not that. Like they're very assembly in a way. You're part of an assembly,
Mhm.
but like, gosh, the freedom to just be able to hang out with Cliff Booth or hang out with Doc Sportello in Inherent Vice, just
Uh-huh.
to live in a world that isn't yours. Wasn't that what movies were designed to do in the first place? You get to live in a world completely outside of what's attainable to you.
Sure.
You know?
Well, to speak to the initial puzzle piece to Inherent Vice, I absolutely I didn't write it down as a puzzle piece, but I was thinking about that because, like I said, when I first saw this, I, watched out of the theater. I'm like, I don't know if I really like it, and it's just been slowly over the last 3 days, just creeping into my mind, and I'm enjoying it more and more. And while I haven't had that experience with Inherent Vice, I still have only seen it the one time, and I've never grown to love it.
Mhm.
It's absolutely like, coming on the heels of so many freaking great movies in a row from PTA. I was looking forward to it so much, and that feeling of like, oh, this is gonna be the best movie. It looks so damn good, and then just walking out and like your expectations aren't, it doesn't have to be the thing that you expected it to be, and you're either going to connect with it or not. It's an interesting thing. You got to look at movies that way.
My big problem with PTA is that he's obviously so angry at Hollywood that he's intentionally trying to make things that are inaccessible.
Right,
Like
right.
that's like part of his goal right now, which it's like, fuck you, get over yourself. My other thing that I don't like about Paul Thomas Anderson is that he very obvious to me hates women
Mm,
and that the whole second half of his body of work has been about how women get in the way or have let him down, or like it's very frustrating to watch his even Inherent Vice, as much as I do love it, is obviously about how a woman manipulates a man to get what she wants without giving him anything in return.
Hmm.
Um,
I hadn't
but
thought of it, but I mean, like I said, I've only seen it the one time, so.
yeah, well, I after Phantom Thread, I don't know that I'll ever go to one of his films again. Um, not speaking to the quality, which I'm sorry, I felt the quality was poor,
Hmm.
but just like where he's at,
Hmm.
and what he's willing to say and put out there, I'm not okay with. And I know Quentin gets some flack sometimes. It's always funny to me when somebody tries to like get on Quentin for like, oh, how you treat women. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Really? The guy who gave us The Bride and Jackie Brown and Shoshana, like you're gonna be like, oh, you don't treat women well?
It's
Okay.
maddening, dude. Like
Oh, it's
there's
insane.
like as part of the promotion of this podcast, I'm on film Twitter a lot, which is the most toxic place in the world. But like just seeing the people trying to have that side of the argument, I can't even. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, this guy has written some of the best female characters of the last 20 years. I mean, it's,
Absolutely. Well, think about it, not to dog on Paul Thomas Anderson, but like think about his female characters.
hmm.
Has he ever had a strong female character?
I mean, I would kind of say Amy Adams in The Master, but
Who's the bad guy?
right, sure.
Who turns out to be the master manipulator
Right.
that breaks up a friendship
Yeah.
that changed both their
I
lives.
guess that's a way to look at it for sure.
Know what I mean now? Like,
I get it. I hear you for sure.
why do we like him so much? That's the question.
That's the question. Well, I'm gonna go to another puzzle piece. I got two more.
All right.
First up, I am going to talk a little bit about Zodiac from David
I was
Fincher.
gonna say that one
Oh
too.
yeah, you had that one.
Uh,
Yeah, the the,
uh,
the whole Spawn Ranch scene. It kind of just it had that just gut wrenching just tension of like a Zodiac. And it, specifically, of course, the whole basement scene at the end, but really so much the whole freaking movie. It really is one of the most tension filled movies like ever, as far as I'm concerned, and it's really only the Spawn Ranch scene, of course, where you really get that kind of feeling, and that's where I'm. This is more of a specific scene comparison, but yeah, I mean, I love Zodiac. Are you a big fan of it?
I hate it.
You hate it, okay.
I do. I do. Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
curious then, what is your where do you find a connection then?
Okay, see, funny, I didn't even think of the Spawn Ranch thing until you said it, which you're absolutely right.
Hmm.
And also like I mean it's obvious it very similar to the basement scene
Yeah.
in Zodiac, which I actually when I saw it in the theater, I was like they as much as I love Charles Fleischer, we're friends, I know him. Like it's like, dude, cut that scene out. Like you don't but but the reason I was gonna bring up Zodiac was because it is a period specific, almost period indulgent film just like this.
Hmm.
It is a sprawling 3-hour ensemble,
Hmm.
um, that the first time you see it, you have to understand the movie is not about catching the Zodiac.
Hmm. Yeah.
The movie is not plot driven. It's not about solving the case. We know the case wasn't solved.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? The movie is about obsession.
Hmm.
The movie is about, you know what I mean, like what it awakens in those people.
Sure.
Right? Like and it's the movie is about yeah, it's about compulsion, it's about obsession. It's not a plot-driven movie, just like Inherent Vice or, just oops, just like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
no, that's actually a really good point too. I hadn't thought of it in that way, but that makes total sense.
one of the reasons I don't like, Zodiac, it's not speaking to the quality because I mean, it's hard to argue with, like, the craft of a David Fincher film.
Sure, yeah.
I really can't stand his work. I think it's offensive and terrible, save for Alien 3 and Social Network.
Mhm.
But one thing about Zodiac that bothers me about movies is it's so lacking in female perspective.
Mm.
Um, you've got Chloe Sevigny, in there. You've got a couple ladies, if you will. But while Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is, Cliff and Rick's movie, um, Sharon Tate acts as the spiritual guide
Sure.
for the film. And when you've got Cliff's storyline going on, it's a mostly female-driven world that he's coming into conflict with, right? Like, um, through Margaret Qualley's Pussycat character,
Mhm.
Margaret Qualley's, and through Dakota Fanning as Squeaky, like, he just automatically assumes that this is a terrible person taking advantage of this guy, right? But,
Yeah,
maybe she actually likes him. Same thing with Leo, um, in his who's the catalyst for him wanting to create change in his life? It's a little girl
sure.
who offers him a new perspective that he's closed himself off from. That you know what I mean? Quentin very brilliantly weaves the female spirit and perspective and presence into his film, and I feel like Fincher is also very anti-women. Uh, but like Zodiac, to me is lacking that perspective.
Mm,
Um, uh, Across the board, and not that that's a criticism necessarily.
sure.
It's just not what interests me,
Gotcha. That
you know?
makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. Because yeah, I mean, there's definitely not a strong female point of view in that movie at all. Like no character that really stands out.
Yeah, I just, I've gone through a lot in my life, and I find that the times where I fuck up my life the most are the times when I forget about, like, the women in my life or,
Right.
like, when I you know what I mean? Like, I'm a big dumb oaf, you know? I'm smarter than the average bear, but, like, having perspectives that aren't yours, I think are so important,
Oh hell yeah.
and, you know what I mean? And I feel like in a movie especially, even if just to create, for lack of a better word, drama,
Mm.
um, what is it with these dude fests? You know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes I feel bad because like I assume you really like Zodiac.
I do.
Which most people do. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I hope I'm talking too much.
No.
I've said my piece. I've said fuck Zodiac. Where are the chicks?
Hey, you like Kung Pao, you're all right in my book, so, you know.
Oh, back at you, sir. Back at you.
Well, what do you got for your next puzzle piece?
No, you stole it. It's all good. I want to hear this last puzzle piece of yours.
Okay, well, speaking of David Fincher, I'm gonna bring up another one of his movies. So I want it to be said right up front, I do not think this at all, but it's just a silly thought that came into my head. And that is a comparison to Fight Club. Uh, Brad Pitt's character is just this ultimate unattainable cool, which of course, like to even think that about Tyler Durden and Fight Club is just the most ridiculous thing, but that is what he
Mm.
was. And Cliff Booth in his own way is also just this like insanely cool character. And I started thinking about the fact that just like a Fight Club, why couldn't Cliff Booth be an extension of Rick Dalton's psyche? Not really be
Sure.
his own actual character in the movie. And of course, I don't think that that is the case, but it is something that popped in my head and I wanted to share. And who knows, maybe Fight Club was an inspiration on the character, to put Brad Pitt again in that kind of a character who is like a symbol of what the main character doesn't have and what he isn't.
Well, like, it's always stood out to me, all 3 times that I've seen the film that Brad Pitt at the beginning of the movie, what is he wearing? He's wearing a denim jacket, and jeans,
Hmm.
right? At the end of the movie, he's wearing white denim and a white jacket and
Mm,
white jeans, you know what I mean?
yeah.
And he's the savior at the end of the film, you know what I mean? He's the guardian angel
Hmm.
of sorts for Leo's character.
Yeah.
Because even though Leo flame throws the chick, I mean, she's already dead.
You're right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? She's already stabbed, bashed in the face, and bitten to shit by a dog.
Yeah.
She's dead. He is the guardian angel. Um, you know, it's kind of like the total 180 of Fight Club in a way, which the yin and yang, I guess.
Sure.
So that is an interesting comparison, I think.
Yeah.
Um, um, I think that there's a real beauty in the fact that this movie doesn't try to be cool. It just is. I think that Fight Club, I mean, you can probably tell I really hate that film.
Yeah.
Um, has a has I feel like that movie promotes evil and stagnation.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like it kind of at best is a message of like, well, can't do anything about it, so like fuck it, you know. And I'm just not into that.
Sure.
This movie is the complete opposite. It's very beach bum. It's very like, hey man, dig it,
Right, right,
you
right.
know.
I hear
Matthew
you.
McConaughey might have made a decent Cliff Booth.
Ooh, yeah, he could have fit that role pretty
He could have played either of them, actually.
sure. Well, and that's bringing it
Yeah,
back to Tropic Thunder again because he was so great in that too.
he's my favorite thing about Tropic Thunder.
He's so
That
great.
joke where he's like talking about kids. He's like, what does he say? Like, at least you get to pick yours. I'm stuck with mine. He looks at the picture of his fat son. He just goes, like just this.
I forgot about that. That's so good.
Yeah. That is one of the few laughs that movie got out of me, but it definitely got that out of me for sure.
Oh my god. Well, do you have any more puzzle pieces?
No, I just wish you could have compared it to a different Ben Stiller directed movie like Cable Guy. Like, can you find a way to tie it to Cable Guy? Because that's a film.
We'll have to think about it.
You know?
We'll find another movie to compare to Cable Guy and get you on for that one. But
God bless it. I'll be there. I'll be there.
well, I'm gonna do the finished puzzle and read down this list of movies. We have got Billy Jack, Hail Caesar, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Tropic Thunder, American Psycho, Synecdoche, New York, The Aviator, Forrest Gump, Kung Pao, we also talked about, Inherent Vice, Zodiac, and Fight Club. So we got a
Well,
really interesting list of movies there. Would you have any closing thoughts about this movie?
I just hope that all the people listening to this podcast just try to go down that list of movies and try to watch them all.
Yeah, right?
Now, like in that order, like I wonder what kind of like
That is a film
Yeah.
festival right there. Holy
Yeah, I
shit.
tell you,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to sit through 2 Fincher films, unfortunately. But just
Hey, they're
kidding,
two
just
good
kidding.
ones, so come on.
I mean, I guess whatever. If you like the Pixies,
At least I'll finally
you
get
know,
to watch Inherent Vice again because I have been wanting to give it a chance one of these days, but
that's one of the movies I keep on my computer that I just watch just in case I'm somewhere and like
yeah.
I only have my laptop and it's like late. I want, I just need like a blanket, you know. Inherent Vice.
Nice. Well, Joe, this has been great. As always, I want to ask you if there's another movie you've seen recently you'd like to recommend.
Another movie that I've seen recently. No, not none that are really popping in my mind like the last time, like when I saw Uptight.
Right.
That was just I still recommend Uptight if you haven't.
Well, go see
Um,
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again, I guess. So,
oh yeah, oh absolutely. Oh, I did see the new Spider-Man. I really enjoyed that. That was
okay.
very nice.
Right on.
It's nice to see a movie for 10-year-olds that was only meant for 10-year-olds.
Nice.
Oh wait,
Oh.
Witches of Eastwick. I never saw it. Have you seen it? Have you seen this film?
Have I ever seen which? I must have. I feel like I
Dude,
have.
it is when you talk about like an assembly of talent
Yeah.
that's just like you've got on camera, you've got Jack Nicholson, Susan Sarandon, Cher, and Michelle Pfeiffer,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, your on-screen talent is on par, but then you've got operating the camera, you got Vilmos Zsigmond, right?
Yeah.
And directing it, you've got George Miller, writer director George Miller.
Huh.
Like the assembly of talent is in full swing, dude.
Oh,
Dude,
yeah.
see, my niece Cheney came to visit me for the first time. She's 13. She came to visit me in LA all the way from Florida, and she showed it to me. And we rented it from a video store, Cinephile Video, Santa Monica, go. And halfway through, we rented the DVD, and halfway through, I was like, turn this off. And we went to Amoeba up the street, and we bought 2 Blu-ray copies. One for me, one for her, and finished it on Blu-ray. Witches of Eastwick, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, classic. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, Joe, where can people find your stuff?
Facebook, you just look up Blue Means Pregnant Films. We have a Facebook page right now. That's it. By the end of the year, though, we'll have an official like real site, like where you can see all the films, and there's some worth watching in there.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks as always, and I'm hoping to have you back soon, man.
Anytime, anytime.
Welcome to the world's first podcast. Well, the first one they've done. Gas Money Pictures presents Filmmakers On, a podcast for filmmakers by filmmakers about the ever-changing media landscape. Each Thursday, hosts Jay Horton and Sean Alden Reed speak to a media insider about their journey through the industry and how to survive without going crazy. Segments like What Are You Watching?, Media Roundup, and It's Your Turn give Jay and Sean the opportunity to do their favorite thing, discuss what's going on in movies, TV, and media, and mainly disagree. Filmmakers On is available on your favorite podcasting app or at www.filmmakerson.com. And check them out on social media at Filmmakers On. All right, so that does it for our conversation about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood from Quentin Tarantino. I want to thank Joe Black for being here, and Chad Clinton Freeman. He's actually recovering from eye surgery right now, so hopefully once everything is all good and clear, he'll be able to go watch the movie, and maybe we'll do like a special follow-up episode, get his thoughts on it, because I know he had been really looking forward to doing this episode. So Chad, quick recovery, and you got to go see this movie, man. So that does it for today. I want to thank you all for listening and remind you to please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you're subscribed on your podcast app of choice, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. We will be back on Friday with a special ranking episode where we rank all of the films of Quentin Tarantino. It's a really fun conversation. And until then, let's leave you guys with a piece of music. And, I'm trying to think of one that would fit the old-time Hollywood theme of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't really have one. But what I do have is something that fits the Tarantino grindhouse kind of thing. Our buddy Chad Clinton Freeman, who was supposed to be here for this episode, had a film festival called Pollygrind. And my comedy rap group, MC Random and Jewish Dave, did a theme song for Pollygrind a few years into the run of the festival. And, it's absolutely inspired by a Tarantino-like feel. So why don't we play that for you guys today? So this is Hustle, Fight, Grind, the Pollygrind theme.
Life is hard, and sometimes in order to get what you want, you gotta get your hands a little dirty and hustle for what's yours. And sometimes you have to take a stand for what's right. When nobody's watching out for you, you gotta watch out for yourself. And sometimes you gotta get even dirtier when there's no getting around it. And that time is right now. It's time to grind. Hustle, fight, grind. It's time for Pollygrind. Time for Pollygrind. Time to hustle, fight, grind. It's time for Pollygrind. Time for Pollygrind. Time to hustle, fight, grind. It's time for Pollygrind. Time for Pollygrind. Time to hustle, fight, grind. It's time for Pollygrind. Ever since H.T. Lewis was splattering, skulls were shattering, Doris Wishman was pushing buttons, and we're on to something. Individuality, diversity, and creativity is what we need. And now we're gonna get a film festival of a different breed, with Ted B. Michaels and the rest of the infamous psychos. Him, her, and what's her name? All getting down, playing the bunny game. Lloyd Kaufman, Robin Leach, and Chad Clinton Freeman. Answer your phone during the screen and get eaten by a demon. Or Markovitz, Garvey, it's Polly Staffel. You only keep your soul if you win a next raffle. Theater 7 is a spot where all this madness is happening. Drive down 3rd, it looks like a zombie gathering with screams like a scene straight out of hell. Better hope that your film doesn't get trashed by Josh Bell. Fight, grind, it's time for Pollygrind. Time for Pollygrind, time to hustle. Fight, grind, it's time for Pollygrind. Time for Pollygrind, time to hustle. Fight, grind, it's time for Pollygrind. Time for Pollygrind, time to hustle. Fight, grind, it's time for Pollygrind. Bloodorama, fucked isn't new. Weirville, Crown Town, Poly U. We got twisted tunes in our house on the left. No phony baloney, this is Area X. It's really real, this is a zombie palooza. The outcasts go blast with a big ass bazooka. Screw the box, thinking outside the outside. We're different and original and full of pride. And she remember doing thing with the beats and flow. Got everybody praying, dear God, no. Dave provides the music, tends to random beats, screaming with lyrics, open up to resurrect the demon. It's time to grab some popcorn and open your mind. Sit back and relax, cause this is Pollygrind. It's time to grab some popcorn and open your mind. Sit back and relax, cause this is Pollygrind. Fight, grind, it's time for Pollygrind. Time for Pollygrind, time to hustle. Fight, grind, it's time for Pollygrind. Time for Pollygrind, time to hustle. Fight, grind, it's time for Pollygrind. Time for Pollygrind, time to hustle. Fight, grind, it's time for Pollygrind.
and all points west.